What's up, everybody? Welcome to today's edition of Locked On ACC. I've got Tyler Aki from Locked On Syracuse in the building. Of course, we're going to go over some Duke conversations. The DWI, Paolo Banchero starting. A little tricky there, but of course, we've got a Syracuse expert who's going to talk about what he's been through with his team in the past couple of years with some scandal. How do you best handle when things happen to your squad or maybe even your coach? We'll have Tyler talking about that. More importantly, we've got to get into some of these basketball games, some slow starts, some keeping it moving, ultimate wins for other teams. We'll have that conversation on today's show.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Again, Tyler Aki in the building, Locked On Syracuse. And of course, we rocking and rolling hoop style. We know that Syracuse's football season isn't exactly ending in the bright, shining moment that we thought it would. Maybe they would turn a corner, but after that game last Saturday, I don't know, Tyler.
Yeah, it's pretty much done. Not too concerned about it, though, because the goal is to get yourself to basketball season, and that's where we're at right now.
100% agree. I also saw some transfers going on. I think that's everywhere. Now people are starting to finally realize, like, maybe this is not a program for me. And listen, at the end of the day, do what you got to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is sometimes weird timing. Like, you got 2 games left. You couldn't stick it out for another game or two, but hey, yeah, sometimes you just sometimes the time is now. And for a lot of these players, they're exploring those options, and you want to get involved in a spring game, start that recruiting process earlier, because if you don't dip out now, someone might take your spot at a school that you might want to go to.
That's very true. Good point. Now, they're in basketball news, as we had mentioned, transitioning to things. College hoops is underway. Of course, teams are starting out with some gimmies, some playing, buying games, all of that good stuff. But they're still struggling a little bit with some of these, even whether it's a start, finish, all of that stuff. We're going to go over that. Want to get your thoughts, though. Last night, Paolo Banchero started during the Duke game after the controversy with the DWI, where he was charged with aiding and abetting to Michael Savarino, who is Coach K's grandson, and yet and still Paolo got the start. He was made unavailable for media, and everyone's just wondering, do you think it's a good idea to have a player who's gone through a wild weekend out here just like everything's normal, starting lineup, let's just roll?
It was odd. It certainly was odd. And it feels like we learn a new legal term because of college basketball every single year. I'd never heard of aiding and abetting. I don't believe it's a law in every single state either. So maybe that's a part of it too. But I look at it as, listen, the kid made a mistake, obviously. We shouldn't tear his entire reputation down. But if you're Coach K, you're a leader of young men, and you should be implementing punishment, because obviously what he did was very, very stupid of letting his grandson drive with a .08 BAC at that moment. And whether or not Paolo was in the wrong or had done anything wrong in the moment, you still have to send a lesson. You have to send a lesson that, listen, this is college basketball. You can't be going out and doing stuff like that and letting your teammates down, because that's a bad teammate right there, of letting someone get behind the wheel like that. And the sad thing is it's so easy these days. You pull out your phone and you hit a button, and someone's there to pick you up.
Yeah.
This should not be an issue now. And that's I think the saddest part out of all this is that it is super avoidable. And yet you look at this situation and it continues to pop up. I mean, we see it at Gonzaga too, with Mark Few and Jalen Wilson at Kansas. This should not be an issue in the year 2021, but here we are.
Yeah, 100% agree there. But more importantly than that, you're the type of person who has been known for your militant background. You're on your farewell tour and you're trying to end on a good note, and to have it be your grandson, the one that's in trouble, and to say during the media availability post game that it was a captain's decision to let Paolo play and be in the starting lineup. I'm like, nah, I'm not giving my decision to 21, 22-year-olds. I've been doing this thing a long time. I'm absolutely going to put in some sort of penalty accountability where you can even if he didn't start the first 5 minutes, even if he didn't come into the second half, I would have been like, okay, at least he's getting some sort of punishment. But to have him out there just rolling, they beat Gardner-Webb, of course. It was a 52-92, blowout. But in the day, that's not the story. And of course, you saying that it's not what everyone says in the papers, blah, 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 doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the man got a charge. So I'm just kind of concerned with how the leadership is going. Like, maybe are you not caring anymore? Are you just trying to really ride under with no conversations about it? It just doesn't seem good. But I say all that to say, would love to know your thoughts, and someone who's dealt with kind of some Syracuse basketball controversy scandal. How do you best move forward as a team, as a program, and really just keep rolling?
Well, the first part is that there needs to be some sort of addressing of it. And it feels like all of it is sort of being pushed to the side. It feels like at Duke, they're going to obviously the walk-on is someone of notoriety, right?
Mhm.
If any other walk-on in the country were to do something like this is probably a very big non-story,
Yeah.
right? And the walk-on maybe kicked off the team, whatever. But because of the status of the walk-on, all of a sudden things get a little bit more interesting. And I, as someone who's seen how it's been handled in the past with different things, like I remember back in, I believe it was 2012-13 season,
Mhm.
Michael Carter Williams was charged with shoplifting,
Mm.
and there were no suspensions handed out to him. He paid off a fine, and everything was sort of settled outside. And listen, if that's the way that the legal system is going to work with it, okay. Now I know Paolo and Savarino have court dates, and we'll see what the findings of the court are when it's all said and done. But I think you have to lay down the law at a certain
Mhm.
point.
Mhm.
And because this is not okay, whether it's a walk on, this is not okay if it's your top player. And that's one of the interesting little spectrums that you're seeing here, is that it involves both
Yeah.
the top player in your program
Yeah.
and I'm not going to say the lowest player in your program because it's Coach K's grandson, but in terms of quote unquote status, the
Yeah.
walk on is like everyone. If you're going to be a really good culture, everyone needs to be held to the same standard.
Yeah.
And I just don't see that really happen. Well, I guess it is sort of happening at Duke because everyone seems like is getting away with it right now. But you need to be able to lay down the law, and
Yeah.
that's something that Coach K just frankly isn't doing right now.
I just think it's very sad that we're still having because he's a really star player, we're going to just sweep it under the rug, or we're just not going to address it. We're going to
Yeah.
let it go. Like, I wish we were also past that. The same way we now have Uber and Lyft
Like,
available.
it's one thing if he shows up 2 minutes late to practice. It's
Yeah.
another thing when you're letting a teammate get behind the wheel of a car with a .08 blood alcohol level.
Yeah.
Like,
Because you're
these
gone.
are
At point oh
right.
eight, you're faded.
Yeah. And especially in the case of Paolo. Now, I don't know if there have been any details of whether or not he had anything to drink that night because he's 19 years old. So
Mhm.
by the letter of the law, he's got a zero tolerance policy.
Right.
And I look at this situation like it's just a bad teammate. Bad teammate, bad friend, whatever. Like that stuff should not be happening ever.
Yeah. If you have to fight your teammate, honestly, to be like, yo, bro, you're not driving, I'm for that. I'm
And
just
guess what?
saying.
Who's gonna win? Who's gonna win in that fight? A guy like Paolo or the walk on Coach K's grandson? Like,
No tea, no shade, but we already know what it is. That's hilarious. All right, how does your favorite restaurant consistently make such delicious food? The short answer: they have access to the right kitchen tool with Made In's professional quality cookware and kitchenware. Anyone is capable of making restaurant quality food at home. If you're serious about cooking and Thanksgiving is coming up, you want to get a dish in, you want to try it with your family, I honestly encourage you to try Made In's cookware and kitchenware products that are used by thousands of the world's best chefs. If quality and craftsmanship is important to you, you should check out Made In. It is a cookware that has worked for renowned chefs and artisans to produce some of the world's best pots, pans, and even wine glasses. I had some Pinot Grigio myself in a Made In wine glass the other night, and it was chef's kiss after a very hard day. So right now, Made In is offering our listeners 15% off first order with promo code Locked On, because this is the best discount available anywhere online for Made In products. So go to madeincookware.com/locked on. Use that promo code for 15% off your first order. Again, madeincookware.com/locked on. Use promo code Locked On. We're here with Tyler Aki from Locked On Syracuse, and it is hoop season, so we are in full effect there. He covers Locked On Syracuse, and he does such a great job with basketball. And listen, early season struggles for some of our teams, right? We're looking at Clemson, Pitt, and UVA, ones we're going to point out today. I personally stayed up for half of Carolina and College of Charleston, and I was like, ooh, this is getting a little dicey, but we'd love to get your thoughts. Pitt picking up a win against UNCW, 59-51. Squeaking it out, however you got to do it, especially with Pitt right now. I'm feeling like Capel is having one of those very hot seat seasons.
Right. And the problem with the ACC right now is how bad the bottom of the conference is. So it might make the records of the teams at the top a little bit more flowery than what they really are, because you're going to be able to beat up on the Wakes, the BCs, the Pitts of the conference. I don't know how good NC State's going to be after losing Manny Bates, too. That's a huge loss for them. And they've played in some close games, too. So I'm a little bit worried about the conference. There's
Do you
been some
think the
losses.
conference is worse than what we truly believe? Because I thought we were going to have a pretty decent squad, but I'm
thought
starting
it
to get a
would
little
be-
scary.
I thought it would be better than last season. And last
Okay.
season was a down year. You've heard coaches come out. Tony Bennett said on a podcast that the conference was down. You rarely hear a coach admit the state of the conference from a season ago. And for him to go out and say something like that very candidly, I think was something that kind of opened some eyes. And I thought, okay, things will be better this time around. But it just has not been the case, at least in the early going. I think certain teams are better. When you look at someone like Duke, Duke obviously looks way better. They might have the best win in college basketball right now with the victory over Kentucky on a neutral floor. Virginia Tech looks pretty good. Florida State went out and lost on the road against Florida, a rivalry that they had not lost in for quite some time. And then it's going to come down to, what is the mid-tier of the conference going to look like? And where does the mid-tier start? Does that middle tier start with Carolina? Does that middle tier start with teams like Syracuse and Florida and Louisville and teams like and Notre Dame? Where does that middle tier start? How many teams before you get there? Because right now it looks like Duke's in a tier of their own, and then everyone else is kind of below that in tier 2, 3, and 4.
Now, do you think that I personally sometimes don't really like watching the beginning of the season, because I feel like teams are still figuring out their identity. The boys have barely been on campus as a unit, squad practicing, right? And so I like to give grace until we get into conference play, and then we can make judgments. We're out the gate, injuries, notwithstanding. Do you sort of evaluate like, oh, this is going to be a long one for certain teams, or maybe they're actually starting to figure it out early?
I'm worried about one team in particular, and I think overachieving early on for another team, and they both come in the state of Virginia. Virginia, I'm a little worried about, and Virginia Tech.
I am worried about Virginia. Same.
One of the things about these early games is you want to leave no doubt for 40 minutes, and that's something that Virginia Tech has done. They're out to a 3-0 start. They've beaten every single team pretty handily. Meanwhile, on the other side for Virginia, you lost against Navy in the opener. You come back and bounce back with a win, but then you never stood a chance in that game against Houston. So that to me is a little bit worrisome. And listen, Virginia's going to have a coaching advantage in nearly every single game they play this season.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, it's not always the X's and O's, it's the Jimmies and Joes. And I don't know how good that roster is right now for Virginia, because like, who are you going to trust to get you a bucket on that roster right now? It's not a very long list, if that list even exists at all. If you're
After
in a crunch
Clark,
time situation,
it's getting dicey.
yeah, and even him, he's more of a defensive-minded player. So.
Yeah, for sure. But I think it's also, to the point of Virginia fans already getting upset when, okay, are y'all officially blue bloods now? Because I don't remember the last time Virginia has been, 15 years in, 20 years in being a staple school. But now all of a sudden you win, after you come off of that UMBC loss, you win a national championship, you have this sort of runs, and you have Coach Bennett be the staple in college basketball. Now, are you spoiled? Are you now saying, why aren't we great at all times?
I would say no, just because that doesn't seem like the type of ship that Tony Bennett runs. He seems like a really strong leader. And again, if Virginia wanted to kick him out, that line of teams that would be knocking on his door to come take over their program would be very, very long. But when I look at Virginia, this has always been sort of their problem is, if you fall down early, you don't have much hope of coming back. And because of the pace that you play at, the slowest average tempo or adjusted tempo in the entire country. So when you go down, and the reason why it worked back in 2019 was because you had Ty Jerome, Kyle Guy, DeAndre Hunter. You had dudes that could get buckets for you.
Mhm.
But now, and you just didn't fall behind very often as well. Now you don't have that star-studded cast of players and future NBA players that can get you those sort of buckets when you do go down 7, 10 points early, because you can go down 5, 7 points, but in reality, when you play at the tempo Virginia does, 5, 7 points feels more like 10 to 14 points, which
Yep,
is the
yeah.
sad reality of it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree there. And then you look at teams like NC State, who barely beat a Central Connecticut State University team, losing Manny Bates, like you mentioned. But they, to me, are in the lower tier of having to figure out who they are as a team. And Coach Keats, this is another year where he's going to have to be that stepchild, the ugly stepchild in the state of North Carolina, which he doesn't want to be. But also, you're competing with the Wake Forest of the world, who's going to say maybe we're the third best team in the state, and we're trying to figure out who we are, because Coach Forbes certainly has the Demon Deacons off to a decent start.
Yeah, and Wake Forest is going to have a cushy little start here. You look at their next 3 games: Charleston Southern, NCA&T, Kennesaw State. Those are all
Yeah.
teams on KenPom ranked outside the top 250. So those are teams that you should be able to take advantage of and get yourself out to a 5-0 start, maybe build a little bit of confidence. But what's going to happen when you take on, you've got Oregon State at a neutral floor, you've got Northwestern, Virginia Tech, and then you get into the meat of the ACC schedule. That is a really tough ask. And sometimes I like always the gradual build in both
Mm.
football and basketball, where, okay, you start off with the FCS school or the team that's like 270th in the country, but then you build your way up slowly. Then you get to a team that's like, oh, like 170. Then you get to 100, and then you maybe get into a Feast Week tournament to really
Mhm.
build up your stamina, it seems like. And that's an approach that Wake Forest, it feels like they might get blindsided at a certain point. It's almost like what we saw with BC football this year, where they played nobody out of the chute and lost their quarterback. And
Yeah.
then you get into some of these games and boom, you're kind of blindsided and your season's not going as great as you thought it might be out of the gate.
Well, I was just going to say, just with Wake Forest football as well, they had a nice cushy start, and now everyone's questioning them whether they deserve to be in college football playoffs before the Carolina loss, right? And they're saying, "Oh, they didn't play anybody, the books are cooked, blah blah blah." But now you see them, bouncing back with that big NC State win, and it's a great segue into the Week 12 matchups, because I want to talk about what teams are you excited about? Are there any games at this point, or can we just get to the championship? I would love to hear that from Tyler Aki, because I think we're at the point now where we're ready for the season to get in full basketball mode, but there's still a couple football games left. So if you want to bet with anything, I suggest you use BetOnline, the number one spot for all of your basketball and football action this season. You can head to their new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. You can also bet on things like NHL, boxing, UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. So don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports by hitting up betonline.ag. You are exactly where the game starts. So we're finishing up here with Tyler Aki, and of course, we've got Week 12. I cannot believe we're already almost done with football. It's been a fun ride.
Yep.
It's been enjoyable. Some things we thought would happen, most didn't, of course, but it's always fun when you can assume it's going to be Clemson and everybody else, and it turns out to not be that whatsoever. Duke is kicking us off with Louisville at home, their final game. They are looking for a desperate ACC win. Can they find it here? They might have to wait till Week 13. Who knows? But I don't know. I'm feeling like Week 12 is just more of the same. There's not really anything that jumps off the page, but at the same time, maybe there's some games for you, Tyler, that you're excited to see.
There's one nuance that I'm pretty excited to see, and it's the Clemson Wake Forest matchup, because technically Clemson's not eliminated yet
Yeah,
from winning the Atlantic. And
which
if
is
you
crazy.
and they enter this game against Wake Forest as a 4.5-point favorite too.
Which is
Now,
wild.
I saw today that Justin Ross is done for the season. He's shutting it down and he's gonna focus on the NFL draft. But this is a Clemson team that could somehow weasel its way into the ACC championship game after drawing all that scrutiny out of the gate. And again, they've got a game in, or Wake Forest is the one with a game in hand. They still have an extra game to play in the conference, because that UNC matchup did not technically count. But
Mm-hmm.
this is a very interesting finish here in the ACC, because everything that we thought we may have known, we thought this was going to be a 2-horse race in the Atlantic between NC State and Wake Forest, and all of a sudden Clemson enters the chat and could really, it's weird to say Clemson could shake things up by making it to the ACC championship, but here we are.
Yeah, if you're an NC State person, you're certainly cheering for Boston College and Clemson. You're trying to figure it out because there is a percent chance, but I don't think Wake Forest will drop this one. I pray. This they've been doing too well, but at the same time, I always say DJ could have a great game, but that defense is going to be one where Sam Hartman struggled against NC State, threw 3 interceptions, and he just didn't look good. His receivers didn't step up in the way. Ja'Cory Roberson, we don't know his status for the game, and they don't have Christian Beal-Smith for the run game. So those are 2 big factors going in. A.T. Perry's going to have a huge game. Will they call offensive pass interference on him this time around? Like, third time's a charm. I've seen it 3 times now with my own 2 eyes. Not sure about that. But, I think with NC State, they just have to stay focused because you still have a Carolina game where anything could happen. As much as you want to say it's in the bag for an NC State team who has improved mightily, Carolina still has the horses in the stable to get it done and make that upset.
No, absolutely right. And then the other game that I kind of have circled here is Pitt and Virginia, because this has major, major implications in the Coastal. There's a lot of divisional implications here at the top this week. So even though the games maybe aren't the marquee matchups that you've been looking for, there's still intriguing storylines. Pitt enters this game as a 14.5-point favorite over Virginia. So we'll see. Again, these have been sort of the let-up spots at times for Pitt, but they've got a chance to potentially clinch the ACC Coastal this week against a Virginia team that you go toe-to-toe in a shootout. Like, that's the thing, is it almost feels like the ACC to a degree has morphed into the Big 12 in a sense where you see a lot of shootouts, and a lot of these games that have been pent up as offense kind of lived up to the bill for the most part. And that's been super entertaining if you're a fan of offensive football, because there's some really good quarterbacks in this conference that can put up a lot of points.
I think I was pleased with Bronco Mendenhall not putting Brennan in the game against Notre Dame, because you just knew like that was going to be not a great showing. Hopefully he'll be healthy enough to take on the Panthers this weekend. And what could happen? I can't even believe that we're talking about, I wanted to talk about Miami and Carolina so bad at the end of the season. Miami blew it. Carolina blew it. I'm just pissed at everybody because I had in my head how it was going down. And Sam Howell today talking about how he is not for sure if he is going to go to the NFL and he is thinking about staying for another year. And I'm like, but why? There's nothing to come back. I mean, mind you, we have great recruits and all of that stuff, but recruits still take time and they have to learn the system and schemes. And unless they change something on defense, there's no reason. Go make your money. Not that he's not making good Bojangles money, but I'm just saying there's better money in the NFL, right?
I mean, is there better money than Bojangles money? I mean,
I don't know. Like Kenny, I think I said this, I tweeted this out, Kenny Pickett paid his offensive linemen in food. He got them a weekly steak dinner at one of like the local restaurants in Pittsburgh. Sam, like, where are all the different tailgate
the bow boxes for everyone.
For the offensive line. That's the problem. If you had done that, if you had made them a part of it, they probably would have blocked for you better. I don't know. I'm just saying. Like, I'm a conspiracy theorist, and I think if you feed the big men, they do better.
Yep.
For you.
Incentivize. You always hear it, like especially on Christmas time in the NFL, you always see the gifts that the quarterbacks get the offensive linemen. You always see after a no-hitter, the pitcher buys the catcher, usually a pretty nice gift. So,
okay,
yeah,
you got to let
your
people
guys
know.
Up.
Exactly, 100% agree. Tyler, always a pleasure to have you. We are getting into the thick of college basketball. Would love to know where people can keep up with Buddy and company when they talk about Syracuse.
Yeah, you can find us Locked On Syracuse every single weekday, Monday to Friday. Myself at @TylerAki_ on Twitter, and you can find us on Twitter as well and YouTube for Locked On Syracuse at @LO_Syracuse.
Did the Drexel game stress you out, or were you fine?
No, because you kind of knew. You just the way that you kind of knew. You knew. Listen, Jim Boeheim is the master of the second half adjustment. I've seen this play out many a time where, okay, one team gets a little hot shooting from 3. You push the forwards up in the zone a little bit, force a couple turnovers here or there, turn those turnovers into points. I wasn't too worried.
Yeah, Syracuse is doing well, like right under that radar. Again, making sure they do just enough to where they stay in that undefeated conversation, but not too much to where they have controversy. Like they're riding it nice right now.
Yeah. No, they're in a good spot, I think, for their program. And the challenges are going to start. They go to Atlantis. You could run into some teams like Baylor, UConn,
Mhm.
Loyola, Michigan State. Those will be nice tests for them.
For sure. Well, until next time, it's always a pleasure to have you guys. Make sure you come back tomorrow. We have got Freestyle Friday, Jersey Drake in the building. Follow us at Locked On ACC on Twitter. Also, subscribe on YouTube. Thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. Until next time.